And it's 8 and you're live on ETV. Tonight, you're welcome to Fact Sheet. Here, we discuss the issues dispassionately. Here, we speak to the right resource persons. Here, it's about you, it's about the fact, and we ensure at the end of the day, you carry something which is factual with you when you leave this show. My name is Samuel Chen, and I welcome you to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet, live on ETV and live on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Tonight, I want you to take your papers with me as we talk about the facts and as we delve deeper, even as we go into the elections, God willing, next week, Monday, as Ghana goes to the polls. Today marks a very important day in our journey towards casting our ballot on the 7th of December. Today, the special voting exercise happened. The security agencies, the media, and some personnel from the Electoral Commission cast their ballot today. But what informed the decision to cast for Party A or Party B? Was it as a result of the campaign promises of the various political parties, or could it have been as a result of the various polls that we have seen going into the 7th December elections? If you've been following the campaign trail, various bodies and institutions have come out with polls suggesting that Party A or Party B may win the elections. Does that inform the reason why you vote in a certain direction or the reason why you're going to vote for a certain political party? These polls, do they really reflect on the outcome of the elections in the years that they have been in existence with us? If you recollect, the Economic Intelligence Unit, somewhere in June, told Ghanaians the NPP would win the elections. The CDD also came out somewhere 3 weeks ago, indicating that the election was going to go in the favor of the NPP. Equally, have we had Pollster Ben Epson also make the case that the NPP is going to win the elections going into the 7th December elections by some 52.6% and the NDC 45.7%. And the factors that will inform this voting pattern, he says, will be free SHS, training allowances, the fight against corruption, and many more. They are not the only institution. The University of Ghana has also come out with its own polls, and these polls suggest the NPP is going to win by some 51.7%, and the NDC will be following with some 40.4%. Would these translate going into the 7th December elections? We would want to understand the figures. We would want to understand what goes into these polls as we go into the 7th December elections. Tonight, that's our focus on the fact sheet. And I encourage you to stay with me even as we look at these issues. Once again, my name is Samuel Chen. We're taking a quick breather. When we come back, my guests are with me and we'll interrogate the issues. And you're welcome to Fact Sheet. Tonight, we're talking about the polls, the history, the facts, the analysis, what they mean, and whether indeed they impact on the voting pattern of Ghanaians. My guests tonight to help me with the discussion are Dr. Louise Asiedu. He's a senior lecturer, Department of Statistics and Actuarial Science, and Dr. Edu Jemfi. He's a political historian. They will join us this evening for us to have the conversation. We'll also have Mr. Ben Ephson join us. He's the editor of the Daily Dispatch, and he's also a pollster. Over the years, he's been polling. Some of his predictions have come true, some have failed. Does the polls really reflect as to how Ghanaians would vote going into the 7th December elections? I am in the studio with Dr. Louise Asiedu, and we are discussing this all-important issue, considering a lot more polls may come going into the 7th December elections. Doc, good evening.
Good evening, Samuel.
I trust you're doing well.
I'm doing so well.
So, how do you feel as a statistician when you hear polls and their results being churned out in the media?
Okay, thank you very much, Samuel, and thank you. Good evening to your listeners and viewers. Here, let's bring this into perspective. Polls generally, or survey generally, is to ask set of questions or question, and your aim will be to get information from these questions. Okay, and then They are most preferred or probable things you have to do when you want to get information about a pending election than any deterministic model or fitting a model that goes back in the past. Typically, to do a good polls, you have to do an exit poll. The thing has happened before. What was the reason why the people went into the vote for candidate A or candidate B? That's to say that I want to make polls about 2020 elections. I have to do an exit polls about 2016 elections. What informed the decisions being made about 2016, and then you could go forward for the 2020 polls. And basically, for most of the polls that are flying around, you could see that there are exit polls before the main thing comes into perspective. And so it is ideal and a desired method or procedure we expect as statisticians if you want to find information from people on a particular or the way they think about a policy or a pending issue is desired to do so.
What goes into the process of embarking on a poll? What factors do you look at?
Okay, and so first, like I said, to do a good poll, you have to do an exit poll. But first, you have to talk about your sample size. How many people are you going to include in your polls? Then two, you go about what methods are you going to use to make your analysis. And so of key interest is your sample size, your people who are going to form part of your study, and subsequently what methods are you going to use to make these analysis so that your conclusions or your results will be representative enough.
Now, does the time of the period of the poll being conducted, does it really matter in the outcome of the poll you have conducted?
And so if you would get me correct, one of the things I had mentioned was that it's a desired or it's something we want. Why do we prefer polls to deterministic or models that will just predict? The reason is that there are recent issues, current emerging issues that are ensuing depending upon whatever event is about to happen. Let's say, for instance, in recent times, we've seen incidents about corruption perceptions. We've seen free SHS. Prior to 2016 elections, we've seen COVID-19 pandemic and its management, economic management crisis. All these things are recent views. And so you would need current polls to be able to know the current minds of Ghanaians. And so it's desired. It doesn't matter what time it is. As at the time you're doing it, whatever conditions are ensuing, you seek to capture all these conditions in your survey. And that's ideal.
So if I understand you correctly, it is based upon the individual who is conducting the poll's time frame he is looking at.
Exactly.
So for instance, if somebody conducts a poll somewhere in November,
yes,
considering the issues that were trending at the time, it's possible that by the first week in December, the same person may conduct a poll and then the outcome may be different, looking at the issues that are ensuing at the time.
Exactly. So polls give you they actually give you a current-based thinking of the Ghanaian people. If you may be your respondent, the current-based, based on whatever is happening. That's what they would think. They are thinking through, this person is doing very well here, this person is not at this time. Their perceptions might change as the days goes by. And so as at the time you did it, whatever current conditions that ensue are what we are talking about. And you are measuring all those things and what people feel about that. That's exactly.
So I'll bring you to this aspect of the conversation in a bit. But let's go back to the earlier point you made about the sample size. Because the last time we met here, we discussed at length into sample size. But not every one of our viewers would have had the opportunity of listening to the breakdown you gave us when it comes to sample size. Under normal circumstances, if you decide to want to embark on a poll or a survey as to how Ghanaians are likely to vote, what sample size are you looking at? And sometimes we hear you say, an error margin of, let's say, +2 -2 or +3 -3. What goes into the sample size?
That is left to the decision of the researcher. The last time I told you that it's a trade-off between cost and precision. If you want high precision, you pay more because that translates into more sample size, and then you have to pay more. It depends on you, the researcher. Margin of error +2 or -2 means that whatever sample you are taking, you are 98% sure that that sample size can infer into the population. okay, because it's 2 error. You are allowing an error bound of 2. And so you are 98% sure that what if you use that sample size for your study, it can infer into the population. You get it? That's different from standard errors. And so you see most of the researchers mixing the margin of error on the sample with the standard error of their estimates. Okay, so if you did an estimate and you say MPP is going to win by, say, 52%,
Okay.
and you say I did it with a margin of error plus or minus 2, that's not correct. The margin of error is on your sample to make that inference. But whenever you compute the estimate, you have to compute the standard errors of the estimate. That tells us the boundary. How high can your estimate go and how low? The rise and fall fluctuation. So I'm saying that I'm giving them 52 plus or minus 2 on a bound. Then it means that on the maximum, this person can go to 54. On a minimum, the person can come to 50. So that's a fluctuation of the estimate. But the margin of error you are talking about here is on the sample to make inference into the population.
So the margin of error is calculated on the total sample size.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
All right. So now let's try and break it down for our viewers to also follow. So I conduct a poll with a sample size of, let's say, 11,000.
Yes.
And then I am looking at, the 10 regions of Ghana. As much as my sample size is 11,000, which is a huge number. And so we are not sacrificing quality for cost issues. Now, would the selection of the areas for polling be important regardless of my sample size of 11,000?
Exactly. So that brings us to the concept of sampling. Once you get a sample size, then you have to also adopt a proper sampling technique to be able to get the results you want. That's to say that you don't go into one constituency and sample all the 11,000 and come out to tell us that Ghanaians say this. You understand? It should be spread. It should represent all the various views or constituencies in the Ghana should have at least a fair representation. It's like the parliamentary system. Okay, we want fair representations in Ghana, so then every constituency across the nation has a representative in parliament. So the same idea. So you have varied views across the country, and then you go into each constituency and then you pick some views. Remember that it depends on where you live and what situations are ensuing in that locality. That determines what kind of vote you are going to or who you are going to actually vote for. For all you care, people in constituency A are actually happy because there is a factory being created for them. Constituency B, they are not, because maybe they have poor road networks and other things. So based on the place they stay, they would be able to tell you because of A or B, they are going to vote for candidate A or candidate B. Exactly.
All right. So you followed the samples or these polls that have been done. For instance, Economic Intelligence Unit said that the NPP was going to win. This was somewhere in June. And then we had the CDD. We discussed that somewhere, I think, 2 weeks ago, where they were also saying that the NPP was going to win with a sample size of over 2,000 or so. Then now we are being told by the University of Ghana that, their poll, which they conducted, they were using a sample size of 11,000 plus. And then there have been others as well who have conducted their own, research. For instance, Mr. Ben Ephson, who's a pollster, has also completed some work that he suggests that the NPP is going to win by some 52.6%. Now, all these polls, when you sit down and they come out and you are analyzing them, what particularly do you pay attention to? Okay, so let me start talking about University of Ghana polls. I'll pick them post by post and tell you the challenges in each of them and the high points in each of them. So I pick University of Ghana. They go for a sample size of 11,000. And if you look at some of their exit interview, the population size for 2016 was a little above 10 million. And so that's a little good. I think it's fine. The sample size is okay. It would have been interesting if they gave us percentages. Okay, the estimated percentage, this percentage said this percentage. It would have been interesting if they had computed or estimated the standard errors of those percentages. So we know how they fluctuate. If we say 50%, with a standard error of plus or minus 20, it means that somebody can come as low as 30, and somebody can go as high as 70. So when you tell us the standard errors, you make us how small
or how the precision of your estimates. Then we would
Because
have,
usually what I hear them say, when they are talking about the margin of error, they compute the margin of error on the percentage, but which you say is not correct.
no, what I'm saying is that the margin of error is on your sample.
On the sample size.
Yes, it's just going to tell you that for this sample size, it translates into a margin of error of plus or minus. That's fine. When you finish using that, of which you have surety that your sample can be used to infer into the population with a precision of say 98%, then when you calculate the estimate, you tell us how the estimate fluctuates in an interval, and that is the standard errors. So one of the lacking things in the University of Ghana, the so-called University of Ghana, because is the margin of error, the standard error thing. Then another thing I find that they could have simply done was simple test of proportions. I usually say this. You see, there are surveys where we get you clear, but you are going to use them to make decisions as to A or B winning. So do test of proportions to confirm some of these things. Simple test of proportion. You know, it's 0.5, 50%. When you cross 50%, you've won. Look at that person's estimate and check it based on the variability in the sample, whether it is significantly different from 0.5 or it is close to 0.5. And there we can make these decisions. But all said and done, the sample size was fine and the results they were getting were not too far from correct. It's okay. If you look at the one done by Governance Research Bureau, I think this is the very first time I'm seeing using model for forecasting elections. It's a very credible kind of work done. They said they use GLM, that's a generalized linear model. So they looked at previous elections and then they actually modeled the percentage of votes based on the parties and the various constituencies they came from. That's a beautiful work, but what you stand to miss if you do such a model is the current issues. So, because you've predicted based on 2016, JJ's time, 1996, 1992, and all those stuff, you have missed the current dynamics, corruption perceptions, education policies, what is happening. You have not captured all those kind of things. And so what you will be doing would be more like a robotic thing. Okay, this is a trend and it is going that way. And so it would have been interesting. When you read their report also, they don't tell us how the coefficient of determination of their model. That is to say how well, as a statistician like me, I would have appreciated that how well their model will fit in predicting whatever they were doing. And so that's one of the lows of their method they use. But all said they were calling the election for a runoff, and they said on a extreme case, they reported a standard error that translates into 50.68 for MPP and 48.27 for NDC. That is on high bounds. And so that's also worthy of whatever they did were correct, in fact. But then some of the things you tend to lose if you do kind of deterministic modeling of elections is the current issues, because you don't capture them. You don't have any values to account for those issues. And you didn't do surveys or polls. So the ideal situation is to do a survey or poll. If you look at Ben Ephson's own, beautifully done. I looked at it, he talked about a margin of error of +2. I presume it was more about the sample size, not on the estimates he has done. He can clarify that. And more also, he emphasized that in his exit interviews, he talked about free SHS, that in 2016, the NDC made a lot of policy decisions at crucial hours of the elections, and that's how come they actually lost the election. He talked about cancellation of teacher and nurses training allowances prior to elections, and that was one of the main issues. He talked about the fact that creation of the new 6 regions would make MPP increase their votes and the likes like that. He predicted 52.6 and 45.7%. Like the University of Ghana survey, he is also not talking about standard errors of these estimates. He's not doing any test to confirm this estimate. But in as much as the sample size is big enough, some of these things can be credible.
All right, so what I'm trying to wrap my mind around is how different individuals set out to go and find out whether Ghanaians would vote in a certain direction. And yet when they come out with their results, there are some variances in terms of the outcome. How does that happen?
So that depends on what sample size you pick, what sampling technique you use, and what methods you use to do your analysis. You understand? You go out there and you are targeting a category of people that the other person is not targeting. You are using different techniques to do your assessment that the other person is not doing. So ideally, we should be speaking the same language if you are doing the polls right. We should be speaking the same language, because the Ghanaian people are the people we go into, and we are asking them questions that are not leading. Remember, surveys or polls can be biased. I refer you to the case of Tom Bradley in the U.S., a black American that the whites purported that they were actually going to vote for him, and so in polls they went out, okay, we are going to vote for him, not to, this kind of racial stuff. So you don't want a white person to say, I'm not going to vote for the black. But ideally, they were going to vote for the white. But then when you go and ask them, are you going to vote for A or B? They say they are going to vote for. That brings polls bias. So you can actually go out there and not get the right information based on some kind of stigma the person thinks you're going to put on him. So he puts and say, okay, I'm going to vote for this. Okay, the woman is standing with a man and he wants to say he likes the other party, and you could say, I'm going to vote for this. Indirectly, when you go and stands in the poll, he's actually going to vote for the man. So some of these things can bring poll biases. But aside these things, if everything is done correctly, you go out to the constituents, Ghanaian people, and talk to them, you should be coming out with almost similar results.
All right. We will go for a short breather. When we come back, we would want to understand whether polls can be influenced by the originator of the polls. And previously, I made the point about the key ingredients for, coming to a final conclusion as in an outcome. And we've delved deeper into the issue of sample size. But the methodology is what I would want us to pay attention to, which, when we come back, we'll find out whether it can be induced, influenced, to get a determined outcome. And so viewers will stay with us even as we go for a short breather. When we come back, we'll try to understand whether the outcomes of polls can be induced, can be skewed, can be influenced by the person conducting the polls. Stay with us. Come back from that short commercial break. This is Fact Sheet live on ETV. My name is Samuel Ishen, and I welcome you to the conversation. My guest in the studio with me is Dr. Louis Asiedu, and he's a statistician. We are trying to understand the science behind the various polls and surveys that we have had in the past couple of weeks, all predicting for Party A or Party B. And so if we are able to understand the science behind these predictions, polls and surveys, then it will better inform our decisions as to who we are voting for going into the 7th December elections. And so tonight, this is what we are talking about. We'll be joined on the line by Pollster Ben Ephson, who is also the editor of the Daily Dispatch newspaper, and asking a few questions as to how he arrived at the conclusion that going into the 7th December elections, the NPP is going to emerge victorious with a 52.6% win, and the NDC 45.7%. We'll try to understand the factors that went into arriving at that conclusion. And I will speak to other individuals as well on the show this evening. But don't forget to let your views, your thoughts, and your comments be heard tonight in our deliberations. Doc, so before the commercial break, I was trying for us to understand whether it is possible for a survey to be influenced. But before that, let me go on the line and speak to Mr. Ben Ephson and take a few comments from him as to the poll he recently did and the factors that went into that poll. Uncle Ben, good evening. Hello, good evening, Mr. Ephson.
Good evening.
I hope you're doing well today, sir.
I'm fine, and you?
I'm doing well, thanks for asking. So we are trying to understand the processes that led to the outcome of 52.6% for the NPP and 45.7% for the NDC. What went into that survey?
Okay, thank you. In the post-2016 election era, we did some work to find out the variables on which voting voters who voted for the NPP. And three came out: race HS, cancellation of teacher and nursing training allowances, and corruption. For this one, because of COVID and time constraints, we did in Greater Accra and Central, we did 1,500, and we used these three variables. We used polling stations, that the 2016 results, it was between 45–47%. We did a bit of work not to find out how you will vote, but to find out levels of apathy in Ashanti and Eastern, even though they are strongholds of the MPP. If NDC gets 30–32% in Ashanti, and if they get 40–42 in Eastern, and MPP being that difficulty. So this is some total I work about it.
Mm. What methodology did you use, sir?
What we did was we asked open-ended questions. Then we asked them in this election what to be the basis of voting and why would you vote.
Mm.
Yeah.
And these areas that you previously mentioned to us and the methodology that you used, how many of your officers did you send out?
We sent 6, and they were using voice-activated tape recorders. So when they come back, then we transcribe the answers and deduce it, because we realize that people are more easier to talk more freely when they don't see you holding a pen or paper. So we don't ask your name, anything. It's your view that we want.
All right. So you said you did Greater Accra and Central Region.
Yes.
Did you select certain areas to go to for these your officers to go and conduct the polls? And what informed the choice of these areas?
Oh, the areas will not tell you. Why I will not tell you the areas is because these are swing areas that we do our work from in Greater Accra and Central. So these areas, that is one of our strongholds, one of our strongest. I'm not going to mention the areas or electoral areas to you.
All right. If we're not going to know the areas that you went to conduct these polls, it's fair enough. Now, I want to understand the issues that were at stake when your people were questioning the people in these areas that you can't mention to us. What were the areas?
For example, with regards to, in answering, I took into account reactions by some people.
Mm.
They said teacher trainees, nursing trainees, how many are they? They do not know that if you attack teachers, nurses, any form of benefits or training to get the trainees, it reflects both on the two professions.
Mm.
It also reflects on those that they use part of their money for to take care of them. So yes, quite a number of them felt that if Mahama was not a second-term president, he was going to need votes to come into power, and 3 months to elections, you cancel it, and you dare them to vote against you if they so wish. And after 2 months, a month later, a month to elections, you restore it. They felt the trust wasn't there enough for them to think that when he comes back on his final term, he will not cancel it again.
All right. What I'm trying to understand is this particular poll that you did in the Greater Accra and Central region, the areas that you cannot reveal to us, what were the areas that informed the line of questioning that you asked these individuals?
Yes, and I'm told that these areas were the areas that most of the swing voters, that's the basis of which they voted for the NPP in 2016. That is why we focus on these three areas.
But presently, there are present issues that are equally important in terms of determining whether people are going to vote for a certain party or not. Were these issues also captured in your survey?
We use these three because we had done that was just my book. Between 2017 and 2019, we had done opinion polls, but we had not published them. And we had realized that these three areas were going to be the main areas people were likely, swing voters were likely to base their votes on. So we had done 2-3 polls in 2017 to 2019 on areas people would vote on. And these three areas came up at the top there.
All right, Agben, is it not obvious that for people who voted in 2016 based upon these issues of free SHS, teacher training allowances, and then the fight against corruption, the obvious response would be in the affirmative if you talk about the implementation of these projects in 2020?
No, I told that we had done 3 other polls in between. And the essence was to find out the basis of which they were going to take a decision on who to vote for in 2020. And you see, I think that the line of questioning presupposes there will be a good job. What if our polls turn out right? I believe this exercise we are doing will be a bit more fruitful, that's my opinion, if we do it post results of December 7th. Because we are trying to judge whether the poll we did was good or not.
No, I'm just looking at the variables that went into the outcome.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, that you are saying that the basis are so. And I'm thinking that a good poll is judged by the outcome on which the poll is done. Yes.
How long did this poll span?
We did it from third week in August to third week in October.
Third week in October. Would you agree with me if I said that if the poll had been conducted, let's say in November, the outcome may have been different from the period that you use, August to October?
Yes, it would have been.
And so it would be fair for anybody to come to the conclusion that if you admit that the polls would be different, then it means that we could have done the sampling or the polling much closer to the elections with other issues popping in.
But you see, that's what I'm just telling you, that you are trying to get a poll for which you cannot judge. The only judge of any polls done for an election, the judge will be the outcome of the poll. Somebody can do his poll in June and will still be valid. Then they might as well do your poll 4 days to the elections. Because if you do it even a month to elections, there will still be issues that can change. Somebody can say, okay, if you had done it after first, Martin Amity's first letter, they would have been changed. Why didn't you wait? Do you know how many more letters Martin was going to? Yes, I'm sure if you do it after the second letter, it will be different. So these are just hypothetical cases that you are drawing that I disagree with you, because I think that if we did it around October, I think there's a feasible time for us to do. That's my judgment. I don't think that wait till maybe a month to elections and hardly do something.
All right. Now, my final question has to do with a comment which I saw on social media after you had released your poll, which you said that this election, the MPP may win with 52.6% and the NDC may trail with 45.7%. Now, the question others are asking is, in 2016, you conducted similar polls and it was virtually an interchanged, figures that we saw there and that it didn't work. What happened then?
One of my issues of the newspaper, I had to do a front pager to remind people that in 20 years, I had done 5 polls. So if I miss one and I had gotten the other 4 right, there are 2 sides of the coin. Either I had been guessing and I had been in the wrong profession of polling to try and stick lotto, or identifying what I did wrong or what I didn't take seriously care of. And I followed like a bit of the U.S. polls, and I think that one of the things that we missed, I agree, I missed a lot, but it didn't take into account was apathy. So if you realize in earlier conversations with you in other programs, I've been talking about apathy and so on. So that's the difference, and for those who said I entertained them, I guess like I sat in my room, closed my eyes and entertained them. But if the results come and this is spot on, what would they say? Because if in 2020, maybe somebody, depends on the age of the person, somebody who is 30 years is valid in asking this question. Because I started polling in 2000, it was about 10 years and so on. If you are 20, you'll be napkin, that kind of thing. So people may forget, they may decide that they only judge you for this. They are right to do it. Also.
All right, my final question then. If 2016, one of the flaws you realized later on was that of apathy, this 2020 poll, did you capture apathy and its possibility?
That is why we did Ashanti and Eastern.
How did you measure?
We found out, we followed closely the results of the primaries, party primaries. And in 2016, we did not capture the apathy the people of Volta region had against the NDC. So the apathy that would have come about in these MPP primaries would have been people being angry, either going independent or just sitting back. And we realized that the MPP had been doing a lot of work because apathy becomes a serious cancer in your stronghold. Like in NDC post 2016, we realized that they lost 100,000 votes in their stronghold of Volta region between 2012 and 2016. So in NDC strongholds, MPP strongholds, people are rising from the internal problem, in which 45 MPs lost their seats in terms of the primaries. And for the, let's say, 100 safe seats, 200 people, 200 voters decided that, look, we won by a margin of 5,000, 10,000, we don't need. We're talking about a loss of 200,000. So that's why we just did that, just to find out the possible apathy level.
Uncle Ben, we are grateful you made time to speak to us tonight.
Thank you very much.
And that's Mr. Ben Ephson. He is the editor for the Daily Dispatch newspaper. He's also a pollster, sharing his processes leading to the arrival at the conclusion that the MPP will win by some 52.6% and the NDC will follow or trail with some 45.7%. Doc, you followed my conversation with Mr. Ephson. Yeah. What jumped at you when I was having a conversation with you?
See, the last time I was here, I talked about this swing voter thing. You see, they are the deciders of this election. You talk to them, you get to know who is going to win the election. And so you saw him talking about Central Region, Greater Accra Region, places where he did his sample. Basically, there are some regions that you know is going to go for this political party or that political party. He tells you that he actually included some political parties because of the fact that he wanted to measure vote apathy. And so that's beautiful. Then he seeks to get, because there are political party that roots for the incumbent party, government in power, and he wants to know whether they will vote. This result is a little bit consistent with that of the UG one. They actually said 77% of people who actually voted for the current government agrees or think they would vote for, or they don't regret voting for, with about 19% of them saying they regret. And so it's beautiful work. If you go there, you go to these swing people and ask them, then you get the ideal results. What I am having, or the problem I'm having, is the method. You know, when you asked him about the method, he said he went out with recorders and they actually took. Polls beautifully would be counting out how many people are saying this, how many that, they extract the percentages. But for we statisticians, we want to see the standard errors of these estimates. Now he tells you the outcome of the result, the outcome of the election would confirm. But beautifully so, if you had done these standard errors, then as we stand now, we would be able to tell you that you are telling us these estimates are likely to happen plus or minus 2. Now they happened, and they are not in those boundaries. So even if they happen and the party you are predicting wins, and it's outside the boundary, you still got it wrong. You understand? But now, if party A wins based on the prediction, you think it's correct because you didn't give us any boundary of win, you just predicted. And those estimates you have given are not supposed to be precise. And so if party A wins and it's in the direction that you have projected, then you have won. But then if you tell us the boundaries, then we know that this is the precision we should attach to the kind of work you have done. But all said and done, I think the methods, the procedure he went through is beautiful. His exit polls are nice. And then the selected samples he used are excellent.
Oh, but an issue popped up when I was having a conversation with him. The issue we were discussing earlier about time frame.
Yeah.
Now, he says that he did this in August to October. Now, as much as he used issues about free SHS training allowances and all, and the fight against corruption, things have happened presently between November and then this December that obviously may inform whether this same electorate would have a change of mind or not. Or?
Yes, that's true. But the question is, those things, are they significant enough? Are they bigger than the free SHS you talked about, the corruption perception people have on the government, the economic management policy, the COVID-19, are they bigger than them? You see, so you have to assess the significance of whatever has happened. Ben Ephson agrees to the fact that 2016, MPP were able to pinch NDC against corruption, but that's not happening now. Even though there are corruption perception, it doesn't look like NDC is actually punching on it or emphasizing on it or against these people. He talked about this training, nurses cancellation, and the restoration of the allowances that might have influenced. So whatever might have happened, you ask yourself, is it significant enough to swing an election to the favor of a political party or not? And for all you care, speaking to the lead statistician that for the Government and Research Bureau this afternoon, he also admitted to the fact that things like economic management, infrastructure, health, corruption perception, and education usually are key to the electorate, which party they are going to vote for or not. And so these things, if they are captured, then I think the polls are well deserved to be considered. So,
Doc, we have about 3 more minutes before we end the conversation. I'll give you a minute of that to just summarize all that we have said to our electorate who will be going to cast their ballot on the 7th of December.
Okay. And so, like you rightly said, there are polls are ideal, like I've said. Even though we can go for deterministic models to do projections on elections, polls are ideal. The timing of polls are also important. Whatever issues that are ensuing prior to the elections are very important, and they can actually change the fortunes of any elections. What I'm not seeing in recent Ghanaian polls are the fact that we just pick our samples, go in and tell us party A did this, party B did this, and we don't actually confirm or do any confirmatory procedures to say that we can assure or we give you this kind of surety. And it is consistent in most of the polls I've read through. And so these are some of the challenges. But ideally, the outcomes of some of these things can happen. If you look at the sample size they picked, the subjects, the kind of questions they asked, some of these things can happen. Okay, they are viable to happen. That's my little take on it.
Doc, I thank you for joining us this evening. And I'd like to thank my viewers as well for being a part of the discussion this evening on ETV Ghana. Fact Sheet every Tuesday evening, 8 to 9 p.m. My guest has been Dr. Louis Asiedu. He's a senior lecturer, University of Ghana, and production supporters come from Sefa Dankwa, John Kumar, Peter Owari, and the rest of the team who made it possible for us to come your way this evening with the show. And let me emphasize that, God willing, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on ETV Ghana, there will be a repeat of this show. And so for those who missed the show, or the beginning of the show, you can follow the conversation there. But tomorrow morning, live on the Happy Morning Show, I'll be here to discuss the issues, the headlines of the newspapers, the deliberations about the, special voters exercise that went on today, the outcome and the issues that popped up. We'll discuss all of them thoroughly, God willing, tomorrow. But I must also emphasize that Doc is going to be part of our GMABC elections camp coverage. And so from the morning of 7 December till the evening, we've lined up seasoned professionals to join us on the show to discuss the issues, and our correspondents across the country have all been activated. And so if you want comprehensive coverage of the 2020 elections, it should be here. ETV, Happy, and YFM. God willing, tomorrow we'll meet.